Now, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has promised to crack down on pro-Palestinian protesters if they try to vandalise the Cenotaph during the demonstrations in central London this weekend.
A fourth weekend of demonstrations is planned to coincide with Armistice Day on Saturday. Well, joining us now is the Sun columnist Rod Liddle. Rod, strong words from the Home Secretary. What do you make of her comments on this?
Well, I'm sure she's right, but I don't think there's anything she can do about it. The Metropolitan Police seems to be a law unto its own, and we've learned over the last few days that a couple of their advisors are actually demanding that anyone who supports Israel should be investigated for hate crimes. That was one person, a woman called Amina Ahmed, allegedly, and another guy, a lawyer who advises the Metropolitan Police precisely on policing these sorts of riots, has actually been seen standing in these protests, calling for the destruction of Israel. So this is a problem which I think Suella Braverman has now, and all Home Secretaries have had, which is that the police, the Metropolitan Police, has become terribly woke, terribly anti what I think probably the majority of people in this country believe. So I don't know how far it can go, to be honest. It's good to hear the words from Suella Braverman, but whether it'll have any effect, I dare say it won't. My suspicion is that the protest on Armistice Day will be all the more vociferous as a consequence.
I mean, supposedly, Rod, the way this is being set up is that there will be the silence at 11 o'clock, and then any protest, if that's what happens, will take place, I think, about 1:45. And they won't be able to get anywhere near Whitehall and where the Cenotaph is, etc. If it works out, if it pans out like that, and some are concerned that it might not, would that be okay?
I think out of respect to this country, they shouldn't be protesting on Armistice Day. That being said, it's a person's right to protest. Of course it is. But if there was any respect for this country, then they wouldn't be doing that. But then there is no respect for this country amongst those people who are so vociferously and inanely, as your last contributor just pointed out, supporting a terrorist organisation. I mean, it is, as you say, a remarkable thing to see that so many people, though I suspect it's a small minority, a tiny minority of the population, are so much in favour of Hamas that they would march on the streets of London and frankly terrify the Jewish community, which I'm sure it's done. But it's not just the Jewish community, of course, that's terrified. I think the majority of those who are protesting don't have much more time for us. So it's very, very difficult. There's also the added problem that I think the English Defence League are thinking of marching on Armistice Day as well. So it could be, I'd avoid London, frankly, on that day, which is a great shame because, of course, it's a day when we commemorate our war dead.
But, Rod, you must accept that actually out of a crowd of 100,000 plus, actually the majority of people who are there, the overwhelming majority, are calling for a stop in the number of bombs that are landing in Gaza and killing innocent civilians and children. People, of course, are going to feel compelled to do something about that, and that's what these protests, these marches allow them to do.
Why must I accept that?
Maybe you don't. I will rephrase the question.
Indeed,
do you accept?
No, I don't accept that the majority are peaceful, or at least the majority are calling for peace. They are calling for peace, but they're also calling, in the majority of cases, I would suspect, for the destruction of Israel, as we see from the placards and we hear from the chants. I didn't see many people abstaining from the chants. I'm sure there are some, but the majority of those protesters don't seem to be doing that. I mean, I wish they were. And yes, of course, people have a right to protest. They do, and we have to respect that. It's for those people who are calling for no pro-Palestinian marches. I have my grave doubts. We're a democracy, and at times of tension, we must not ape the manners of totalitarians such as Hamas. Try having a protest march in Gaza, by the way, at any point when it's not being shelled, and see how quickly Hamas come down on you. You know, there are so many non sequiturs in the arguments against Israel, amongst those who are protesting against Israel, that they become ludicrous, such as, for example, the organisation Queers for Palestine. Lads, go on, off you go to Ramallah, hold one of your marches, see what happens. I mean, it's a collection of non sequiturs and sort of infantile attitudinizing. Sorry, I didn't say that very well, did I? Apologies.
Got what you mean, though, Rod. Let's stick with Suella Braverman. Another issue she's come into discussion over is her comments on people sleeping rough in tents. She described it as a lifestyle choice, and she's thrown an arrow towards the charities that hand out those tents. What do you make of that?
Well, she's kind of right. When I came down to London in 1978 from Middlesbrough, I slept rough on the streets for, it was 2 or 3 months, usually at Euston Station, in order to try and find a job and also to see my girlfriend who's in London. It was a lifestyle choice of mine. For many of the people who slept alongside me on Euston, it was also a lifestyle choice, and for many others, it wasn't. It was drug dependency, alcoholism, or simply poverty. So I think she's partly right and also partly wrong. She has a point when she talks about charities handing out tents to the homeless. Yes, we want the homeless to be kept warm. Yes, there is a good argument to be made, and Labour have made it, that government policies on homelessness haven't had much of an effect and continue to consign people to misery. But still, I don't see why she should be pilloried for suggesting something which has an element of truth in it. The trouble is these days, when politicians do say something which has an element of truth in it, that's when the fury really starts to grow, and it makes it more difficult to have a reasonable debate about it.
But is it not her that's made it more difficult to have a reasonable debate about this? Because, she's not just suggesting that for some people it is a lifestyle choice. She was using a more broad stroke term to say that, sleeping in tents is a lifestyle choice because other alternatives are available. At the end of the day, she's Home Secretary. She's just announced that asylum hotels across the country, 50, are going to be closed down with no legitimate plan to rehouse these asylum seekers who will ultimately potentially end up either on housing lists or in tents. You can see that there's a link between her actions and people ending up living on the streets.
Yeah, the obvious answer to that, though, is to stop the number of asylum seekers coming in. I mean,
which is her remit.
Yeah, which is her remit and which she should do, and which I'm sure she's trying to do, but hasn't been any more successful than her predecessors so far. I mean, but that is the basic answer to your question, which is, if we're having this problem, the thing to do is to stop it at root cause. Has she made things worse? I don't know. It's sometimes useful when politicians say something which is uncomfortable to hear, but which has an element of truth in it. But I take your point that she was more blanket, more general about the whole thing, and kind of consigned everybody who was homeless into the same category. But I think that seems to have been occasioned by her annoyance with the homelessness charities. But she maybe should have chosen her words a bit more carefully, yeah.